That is the post-modern urbanization. What we are finding is the period which followed after 1970s, particularly after mid 1970s, has seen further reorganization of the city in terms of economy, in terms of morphology, in terms of the social practices. All of these have ultimately changed. There is in fact, हमने पहले लिखा था, there is in fact what radical transformation of the city spaces have taken place. The geography and sociology of the cities, economy of the cities has radically changed. Okay? And this is basically what we call it as the post-modern urbanization. So एक line लिखते हैं, फिर we'll continue. देखो, the period following mid 1970s saw radical transformation. Of the geography of the city as Fordism ran into trouble. Full stop. There were several reasons for the decline. Of Fordism. So number of reasons have been cited. One by one we'll talk about. One first important reason which is cited is the failure to invest in research and development. Sufficiently. So this is seen as one of the reasons. There was less of technological breakthroughs which were taking place. New things, they were less coming at fast rate. That was one thing. Okay? You can understand because, देखो, problem main क्या था कि in countries में we have already seen that these countries had reached their fourth stage of demographic transition. That means the new population growth was less. Okay? And the early population which is already present, if you do not give new products to them, which are radically different products, clearly the demand for the products would be what? It would be less. Because they already have. If you talk about TV, they already have a television. So again, they might not be interested in so much of buying a new television if it is not very much different. ठीक है? iPhone का केस दूसरा हो सकता है. But when it comes to other products, it is not the same case. People then become more rational. So again, what was happening? The technological development was not at the expected pace because it was seen that research and development was not proper in this case. Other problems were also there. Second problem लिखते हैं. So लिखो. The increasing cost of raw material. Bracket में लिख लो. Which was intensified by the oil crisis of 1970s. The oil crisis, you must be knowing, this is, we call it as the first energy crisis of 1970s. So you know that there was formation of OPEC, oil producing countries. They formed a union and ultimately they became a monopoly and they increased the prices of the oil. Oil was the main source of energy during this period. So again, it led to a crisis, energy crisis type of situation. And this also fueled in the economic crisis. ठीक है. So that was one of the basic reason that profits were basically what they were declining. Third लिखो, market saturation. Market saturation of mass produced goods, and increasing consumer hostility to uniform mediocre and quality goods. Next, system rigidity stemming from high capital costs of establishing production along the lines of Fordism. ठीक है. So you can understand, अभी मैंने guidance का example दिया that we had to locate our classroom away from this office, because the main reason was that if I take such a bigger place near the office, it would cost much more. So if I rigidly adhere to the Fordism principle, then again what would happen? The cost would actually increase rather than decreasing. Okay? So such rigid adherence to the principle of Fordism was also making the capital cost what? High. That was also one of the reason why there was reduction in the profits. Then next point, repetitive, boring, physically demanding assembly line work led to alienation among workforce, which degraded the quality of product. So this was another problem. It was very mechanistic type of labor which was there, and labor was very much bored. It was like they were not very much interested in doing the work, and because of that, because they were doing because they had to earn money, but without interest, the quality of product was what? It was low. Next point, adverse industrial relations and labor unrest. Adverse industrial relations and labor unrest. So you can understand, हमने पहले भी बात किया था, the labor union in these areas became what? It became very dominant. And strikeouts, all these type of problems, labor unrest, they became very problematic. Okay? And this was ultimately leading to what? Greater costs. It was reducing the efficiency of the labor. So this was one big problem which was seen. Last very important point is the increasing cost associated with safety and environmental legislations. Okay? So again you can understand, in developed world, can I say this was the period when हमने देखा है environmentalism as a philosophy began to grow. Okay? So there was so many steps which were being taken by the governments to ultimately ensure that environment was also protected. You know very well, 1972 formation of UNEP. All these are coinciding with the period. So again, what happened? The costs associated with environment began to increase. Like for example, very good classic case was of the leather industry. So leather industry is a highly polluting industry. Okay? So ultimately what happened, it meant that if leather industry was located here, it had to pay very high pollution taxes. So what leather industry did, it instead shifted to other countries, and definitely these countries were, which one? It were the developing world countries, where so in the developing world, such regulations are more relaxed. As a result of what we'll be finding, that there was shifting of several industries in these areas. Another very good example is the case of pharmaceuticals and chemical industries. You'll be finding they are another polluting industries. So you'll be finding these also began to shift. For example, you know how India became very important pharmaceutical producing country, because there was shifting of production to India, and Indians ultimately got the technology, and we became the producer of the generic drugs. Okay? So as a result of this phenomena, in fact, can I say, all these problems were accompanied by what was the solution which was seen? The solution was seen as, it was portrayed as the, what we call it as the neo-liberalization. The solution was given as the neo-liberalization. And in this neo-liberalization era, there were a number of things. Neo-liberalization era was very clearly accompanied by increasing privatization. Increasing privatization. Okay? It was to be increased. That means in the neoliberal economy, government is basically what? It is just playing a regulatory role. It is not entering in any of the production system. So government is given what? It is given more secondary role now. So it was basically what? It was withdrawing from the principle of the welfare state which was established during the Keynesian era. Okay? So we began to withdraw. Accompanied with that was the basic idea of globalization. So with globalization, what will happen? The demand of the other parts of the world would also, or can also be exploited. Okay? So all these were portrayed as what? The solution. And thus we entered from Fordism to post-Fordism era. So लिखते हैं इसको. The solution to these problems was seen in the principle of neoliberalism, whereby the state was to have a minimal role. State was to have a minimal role. Full stop. Such neo-liberalization was thus accompanied by increasing privatization. increasing privatization. Full stop. It also meant the phenomena of globalization, leading to greater integration, in the economies of the world, Full stop. This also coincided with the development and growth of information technology. So ultimately, because of that, what happened? We entered into an era which is referred to as post-Fordism. Thus, world economic system entered into an era of post-Fordism. And what is this basic case of post-Fordism? It is the headquarters still remain. This is the headquarters still remain in the city region. But what will happen with the production system? Because production के cost को कम करना है. In these countries, what was happening? In the West countries, there was number of things taking place. One, यहाँ पर, can I say, the labor was becoming costly. That was one big problem. So cheap labor was available elsewhere. Other costs of production were also rising. Land rent was high. Pollution taxes were to be paid. Okay? The problem of labor union. So it was easy and more cheaper to ultimately shift the production elsewhere. So production got shifted to other parts of the same country, and even to the other countries, because now there was globalization, liberalization period. So other countries also opened their economies. Okay? So for example, is very good example of this case is, we find that automobile industry, it shifted from the Great Lake region, Detroit, to where it shifted to a place in US. It is now the main manufacturing center of automobile, and this is your St. Louis. Can I say it also shifted not only here, but it also shifted to other countries like China, South Korea, India. It has also shifted to other parts of the world. In fact, you can understand manufacturing, can I say, it has given rise to a phenomena which we call it as the made in China. Made in China, everything is today what? Made in China. Because China has become the main manufacturing hub of the world, owing to its aspect of cheaper labor. Okay? So again, it has resulted, this shift is very importantly portrayed in the made in China phenomena. Okay, so this is what we call it as the idea of post-Fordism. This is the case of more decentralized development has taken place. So लिखते हैं इसको, in the contemporary neoliberal order, post-Fordism has become the main organizing principle of the society. ठीक है, इसमें देखो एक चीज मैं भूल गया समझाना. I should have explained. I use the word deindustrialization. So what was taking place? This shifting of industries, manufacturing industries, was also triggered by this phenomena of deindustrialization. And what is this deindustrialization? Deindustrialization is a phenomena whereby the service sector industries replace the secondary sector industries. Okay? Because you can understand, in a city the spaces are limited and infrastructure which is already developed, can I say it can be used for more profitable industry? It can be used for a more profitable industry. So in the developed world, what was happening? Because there was emergence of booming of the service sector. So service sector began to replace the manufacturing industries. Thus manufacturing industries had to find some other place ultimately to be established. And this was leading to ये जो हम phenomena बात कर रहे हैं, shifting of the manufacturing industries, it led to this phenomena of delocalization of industries. Fordism was what? It was localization. Post-Fordism was based upon the delocalization of industries. ठीक है, सो लिखते हैं इसमें आगे. देखो, the production of well mature products has often been shifted to low cost locations within and outside the Western countries. Full stop. The process of deindustrialization has also triggered this delocalization of industries. Full stop. Change the paragraph. Parallel with the decline of the traditional industrial centers, has been the creation of new industrial clusters. Often referred as new industrial spaces. Full stop. This has also coincided with the development of newer form of functionalities guided by technological developments like IT type of industries. So stop. All these reorganizations have led to conversion of metro and megalopolises into postmodern global metropolises and megalopolises. Full stop. These are referred to as the postmodern cities. These are referred to as the postmodern cities. Okay? So they can be called as postmodern, they can also be called as post-Fordist, they can also be called as the post-industrial cities. ठीक है, ये सभी टर्म्स एक दूसरे से मिलते जुलते हैं. पोस्ट मॉडर्न, पोस्ट इंडस्ट्रियल, पोस्ट फोर्टिस्ट. ठीक है, देयर विल बी सम बेसिक डिफरेंसेस बट दे आर relating with the same phenomena. They are explaining the same phenomena from different perspectives. So that is what we simply mean by the term post-modern cities. ठीक है. So अब अगर हम देखें post-modern cities के बारे में और भी, so what is the basic morphology of the post-modern cities? So can you see, this was the case of the modern city. So modern city, there was one CBD, surrounding the CBD there were the zones, like this was the zone 2, and surrounding that was the inner city, the middle class suburbs, and there was the suburbs which were located. So this was the structure or morphology was of the modern city. And here number of things you can see, that it is organizing itself along the multiple nuclei. Okay, so some more nuclei have risen, some other areas industry has decentralized. Okay, so again there was emergence of the multiple nuclei. But what has happened today, we are finding that it has converted into what we call it as the post-modern urban spaces or post-modern cities. ठीक है, so this is the morphology of the post-modern cities. अब इसको फटाफट बनाते हैं. Here, इसमें what is the most important thing? The most important thing is the names which are given here, like edge cities, the gated community, the high-tech new industrial spaces, spectacular site of consumption, CBD which was there, out of town, very important, theme park and fantasy land. ठीक है, poor industrial areas, industrial suburbs, large shopping centers. ठीक है, so ये नाम बहुत important है. Structure देखेंगे, very important feature of the postmodern cities is they are amorphous. That means they don't have any fixed shape. ठीक है, but the characteristics would be displayed in these postmodern cities. So इसको फटाफट बनाते हैं. Let us make this. And again, you don't have to be a perfectionist. You just draw broadly. अभी आते हैं. We'll talk about that. Don't worry. I have talked about, in fact. So gentrified enclaves क्या होंगे? Redeveloped areas, that would be gentrified enclaves. Again I will repeat, the names, these terms are more important than the shape. I can also name this as the morphology of an exopolis. This can also be named as the morphology of an exopolis. This is an example of an exopolis, a city which has outgrown to the periphery. हो गया? Okay. So if we look into this, what is the basic change which is taking place between modernism and postmodernism, urbanization, modern and postmodern urbanization? So again, you can see it is given some of these aspects here. Here it is a comparative analysis. So if we talk about the case of urban structure, one difference that is seen is in the case of urban structure. So एक chart बना लो and I'll dictate some of the things. So you make a chart. Criteria of difference. Here is the modern cities and here is the postmodern cities. Modern cities and the postmodern cities. So if we look into first criteria is difference is with respect to the urban structure or the morphology. So can I say what is very important aspect of morphology? Can I say the morphology of modern cities was dominated by CBD? Dominated by CBD. इसमें बस क्योंकि हम जब चार्ट बनाते हैं तो चार्ट इज बेसिकली व्हाट? इट इज अ डायग्राम. So here it is not necessary I write full sentences. ठीक है, I can write in short. So here we are saying city structure or morphology. So here what is the case of city structure and morphology? It is dominated by CBD. By CBD with other zones systematically organizing. With other zones systematically organizing around the CBD. Organizing around the CBD. Either in the form of concentric zone. Either in the form of concentric zone or sector or following multiple nuclei. Or following multiple nuclei. So here what we are finding? Here we are finding that there is a systematic pattern in such cities. On the other hand, in postmodern cities, what we find? The morphology is, we are talking about postmodern city, the morphology is amorphous and chaotic. So you can see it is written chaotic multinodal structure. Chaotic multinodal structure with presence of new features. New features. अभी हमने देखे थे कौन से new features थे? Like edge cities, high-tech corridors, gated communities, theme or fantasy parks, etc. ठीक है. Then another difference can be architecture. So in modern cities the architecture was more functional architecture, that means more rational architecture. It was more functional and rational architecture. But in postmodern cities, what we find? We find that it is based upon the idea of new regionalism, or this new regionalism. In fact, यहाँ पर लिखो new मत लिखो, you write critical regionalism, based on the idea of critical regionalism, where global and local have combined. Global and local have combined to create spectacular, playful and unique. Spectacular, playful and unique architecture. So this is one difference. Then another difference, if you talk about, is with respect to the urban government. And if we talk about urban government, in case of modern, it was basically what? It was managerial approach, where public provision of essential services. Managerial approach where public provision of essential services was undertaken. Public provision of essential services. That means here, in other words, what we are saying, can I say municipalities are playing dominant role in the urban governance? Municipalities played dominant role in the modern cities. Can I say in the postmodern cities, it is more entrepreneurial type of governance, where public-private partnership is the main method. In fact, there is what? Market provision of the services. Many services are privatized. Many of the services are privatized. Okay? So that is one difference. Another difference is on the basis of economy. It is on the basis of economy. So if you talk about on the basis of economy, modern was basically what? It was industrial, based on mass production. ये Fordism हमने देखा था, which was based upon the idea of Fordism is based upon the idea of economies of scale. Economies of scale. So यहाँ पर industrial का मतलब है manufacturing was the main dominant sector. But in postmodern, what has happened? Which has emerged as the dominant sector? It is service sector. And rather than centralized production, there is flexible production aimed at niche markets. देखा है हमने that the system has moved from Christoller model to that of Lost model. याद है हमने देखा था Lost model was based upon what? Market based approach. So it is aimed at niche markets. Economies of scale के बजाय economies of scope. Whatever is the scope, wherever scope means wherever maximum profits can be gained. That is maximization of revenue approach. It is based upon the maximization of revenue approach. Other economic sectors have grown. It is definitely globalized. It is telecommunication based or IT based. Finance is playing very dominant role. And lots of jobs are located where? In the newly developed periphery. In the newly developed periphery. Okay, so from the perspective of economy also what we find it is different. Niche markets is where better markets would be available. Niche market is specialized market for particular activities. That is basically niche markets. Okay, planning, from the perspective of planning there is difference. Modern cities were planned. They were more planned cities where the main aim was socialistic. It was an example of socialistic planning. Socialistic planning. So housing improvements, etc. All these were characteristics of these modern cities. But in case of postmodern cities, what we are finding, they are spatial fragments which are designed for more aesthetic ends. Rather than the social ends. So they are, what we are simply trying to say, they are comparatively less planned. They are more sporadic. There is difference in the culture or society. Difference on the basis of culture and society. There was modern cities also, there was class division. There was large degree of internal homogeneity within the class groups. So we have seen there was zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. So there was class division of the city. In this case, postmodern, it is more highly fragmented. There is no such fixed zones. There is more lifestyle divisions which are there. Some people are living a very extravagant life and they are also showing that extravagance, while others are very poor. Okay? In fact, there is very high degree of social polarization. And we'll be finding that groups are distinguished by their consumption patterns. Okay? So basically this is the difference between the modern and the postmodern cities. एक basic difference याद है हमने देखा था. In modern cities there is balance between centripetal and centrifugal forces. In the postmodern cities, what has happened? This balance has been lost and there is dominance of centrifugal forces over the centripetal forces. ठीक है? So इसको भी अगर as a difference लिखना है तो लिख सकते हो. Centripetal and centrifugal forces is the basis of difference. So in modern cities what we find, there is overall balance between centripetal and centrifugal forces. And centripetal forces हमने देखे थे कौन से थे? These were the economic efficiency forces which were leading to concentration of activities towards the CBD. And centrifugal forces were the differentiation forces which were emerging out of the social division. Okay? So there was balance. But in case of postmodern cities, there is excess of centrifugal forces. Due to which the growth of the city has burst outwards towards the periphery. burst outwards towards the periphery. ठीक है? So this is one aspect of the difference between the modern and postmodern cities. Now if we just very quickly look into the basic framework under which we can put the postmodern cities. The postmodern cities would be something like this. एक diagram उनके लिए बना सकते हैं. They are based upon the phenomena of globalization and restructuring. Globalization and restructuring. There is your culture of heteropolis. Also there is strong political, economic polarization. Political economic polarization. There is presence of interdictory spaces. And specific phenomena are seen like the dream spaces, dreamscapes, which would include areas like edge city, areas like privatopia, others like इसी में नीचे एक और लिख लो, theme parks, etc. All these are basically what? The dream spaces. But there is another aspect of these cities, and that is the carceral cities. And here is the case of fortified cities. And in these cities also there is taking place of politics of nature. Okay, so this diagram we can name it as, इसको नाम दे सकते हैं, a framework of post-modern urbanism. A framework of post-modern urbanism. अब एक एक करके बात करते हैं. Each of these. First, we'll be talking about the case of edge cities. सबसे पहले स्टार्ट करते हैं edge city. इसमें हमने बहुत सारे टर्म्स यूज किए. So one important characteristic is that of an edge city. So what is basically, देखो, what is an edge city? It is a functional center located at the outskirts, at the periphery of the city. Generally these cities develop where? They developed at the intersection of the highways. ठीक है? It is basically, I am using the word functional center. And functional center means that it is characterized more by functionality. That means in an edge city, there is more number of jobs than there are beds. This is the official definition of, or this is the technical definition of edge cities. And it was seen, this type of development was particularly seen in United States. Edge city is different from that of satellite town. How it is different from that of satellite town? It is very clearly, if you talk about satellite town, is more residential town. Edge city, as I said, is a more functional town. Okay? So if you talk about, that is basically what we mean by edge city. Other features of edge cities would be, like edge cities would grow because of, they would be planned, they can be sometimes planned also, but majority of them are unplanned. There is very important role played by the real estate developers in the development of these edge cities. Very clearly, these edge cities are one of the factors which are leading to movement of functionality towards the periphery. Okay? Lots of functionality has moved as a result of these edge cities towards the periphery, because they are lying at the junction of the freeways. What we find, they are also easily accessible. Okay? So that is what we mean by the term edge city. Okay? Edge city, that means, is very clearly distinct from satellite towns. It is not to be confused. That means, अगर हम इंडिया में बात करें, can I say there are no edge cities in India? Hardly will be finding there would be presence of edge cities, because in India we have satellite towns. There is hardly edge cities because we haven't reached to that stage of developmental levels. Even in Europe, it is seen that hardly there are any edge cities. Europe, because Europe has a different characteristic than that of North America. North America is more capitalistic. Europe is still retaining some of the characteristics of welfare state. Okay? So there is much more mixed economy in case of Europe compared to that of North America. Okay? So that is basically the case of edge city. So फटाफट थोड़ा सा लिख लेते हैं इसके बारे में. This concept was given by Joel Garreau. Concept of edge cities was given by Joel Garreau. Joel Garreau. So what is basically edge city? It is a settlement that has grown rapidly in recent times. Full stop. It has more jobs. It has more jobs than bedrooms. Full stop. It has at least 5 million square feet. It has at least 5 million square feet of office space and 6 lakh square feet of retail space. Full stop. The classic location of the edge cities. Is at the intersection of an urban freeway. Thus, it has hub and spoke. Model of road networks. Hub and spoke model of road networks. So there is hub and roads are spiraling out. So there would be spokes also, which would be there. Spokes would be the residential spaces. Spoke. Hub and spoke. ठीक है? So that is if you talk about one characteristic of the cities. लिखो, आगे लिखो. Dominance of automobile and the associated need for parking and the associated need for parking, comma, the communication revolution, the communication revolution and the entry of women and the entry of women in large numbers in the labor market are seen to be the factors which have promoted the growth of cities. Full stop. Role of real estate developers. Role of real estate developers have also been important in some of the HCTs development. In US, three types of edge cities were seen, and these are: one is uptowns, second is the boomers, and third, if you talk about, are the greenfields. So in US there are three type of HCTs which have grown. So uptowns के बारे में लिखो. These are peripheral pre-automobile settlements. Peripheral pre-automobile settlements which have subsequently been absorbed within the city by urban sprawl. Second, boomers are classical edge cities located at freeway intersections. And greenfields are those located at intersection of the farmland, where main role has been played by private developers. Change the paragraph. One essential feature of the edge cities is that politics is not yet established there. Due to which there is political vacuum. That means, कहने का मतलब क्या है? It is not under influence of municipal control. ठीक है? It is beyond the municipal control limits. So under such political vacuum, can I say that there would be a shadow type private government which would develop, some private agency would be regulating the things. So लिख लो, under such political vacuum, a shadow government governed by private is found, which also taxes, legislates and policies there, and policing, we are talking about police, okay, policies their community, but is not responsive to constitutional regulations. But to wealth interests. ठीक है. So such type of cities are referred to as the edge cities. So अगर एक एग्जाम्पल बहुत अच्छा लिखना है, Silicon Valley is basically what? It is an edge city. ठीक है. So that is one thing. Then another concept we talked about here was the case of privatopia. The concept of privatopia. So privatopia is what? It is a edge city residential form. It is a edge city residential form. Full stop. In other words, it is private housing development. It is private housing development based in common interest developments, that is CIDs, and administered by homeowners association. Okay. For example, in America it was found that in 1964 there were less than 500 such associations, but this number by 1992 had grown to more than 1,50,000 such home associations, which was housing about 32 million American population. 32 million American population. Okay. So it is what? It is a highly, if you talk about privatopia, is a place which is an area of extravagance, where in general the people who can afford, because these are the people who are working in very high-tech industries and are earning very good salaries, these would be the people you'll be finding, like you might be seeing that the areas, the townships which are being developed today, where all the facilities, modern facilities would be present. Okay. So such type of privately developed areas are basically what? They are the privatopias. So एक last line इसमें लिखो. These are areas where large dose of privatization and even culture of hostile privatization culture of hostile privatization and non-participation has developed. Non-participation has developed. Full stop. These are very free spaces where extravagance is the way of living. ठीक है, generally you can understand जो private topias होंगे, can I say there would be walled communities. अभी हमने gated communities की बात की. So private topias are basically what? These are gated communities. Gated communities. So इसमें समझ सकते हो private plus utopia. These two terms are added here. Private utopia में private plus utopia, the dreamland type of living space is private utopia. ठीक है. So you might be seeing the type of residential apartments which are coming up in Noida, Greater Noida, where you'll be finding so many type of facilities, swimming pool, everything to be present within this community. That is basically what? That is private utopia. Then next, if you talk about, is the third thing we talked about, one more thing, culture of heteropolis. Culture of heteropolis. Heteropolis नाम से ही पता चलता है what has happened, because this city is a large part of population of this city is what? Migrants. Thus very important thing is minorities would be there would be high population of minorities in such cities, and this migration has led to what? Presence of so many type of cultures existing together within this city. So लिख लो, postmodern cities population is large, which is also made up of large percentage of migrant population. Large percentage of migrant population. Full stop. These migrants carry with them their cultures as they display diaspora tendencies. So याद है हमने बात किया था diaspora, when people carry place in their mind, that is diaspora. So as they carry diaspora tendencies. Full stop. These cities are combination of enclaves. With high identity. And multi-enclaves with mixed identities. Full stop. There is diversity of ethnic adaptations. There is diversity of ethnic adaptations. ठीक है. देखो, this culture of heteropolis, देखो, some scholars what they say, why this is very much displayed, heterogeneity, why it is allowed to be displayed, the culture of heterogeneity, because in such a city there is a sharp divide between the rich and the other, so that the other classes, their feelings are not hurt. Their culture is also given space in the city. ठीक है. And thus people have no problem with the cultures being present. Just what they don't want to share, the money. You can see very clearly what is happening. 1% of the population in India is controlling so much of wealth. ठीक है. Same thing is in US, for example. It is of the developed world, it is the country which has highest level of unbalanced development, inequality of all the developed world countries. Okay? So this is the main reason why this culture of heterogeneity is allowed to develop. So लिख लो, according to Jenks, he is one of the postmodern urbanists. According to Jenks, such a culture of heterogeneity has been allowed to develop so that the problems of socio-economic polarization, racism, inequality, homelessness, and social unrest do not disturb the fabric of the city. Full stop. This heterogeneous culture provides the feeling of belongingness to the other residents of the postmodern cities. Okay? So that is another thing. Then another characteristic was city as a theme park. You can understand one of the highest exemplification of this is the case of Disneyland. In fact, you must have heard about that phrase, the Great American Dream. The Great American Dream. So what we are finding that in such cities, it is very common to find such theme parks and fantasy lands where people will be forgetting many of the problems that they are facing in the city. These would be the areas that they can go and relive their dreams, and it would be very common features. In fact, it is a basically way of what? It is way of controlling the labor. And when I'm talking about labor, which labor? You tell me, can I say all the professionals, IT, etc., they are basically what? Laborers. Only they have been made to feel more important. So these white collar workers basically have their own type of needs. And one of these needs is they have very big dreams. But the actual situation of capitalism is that not all of them would be able to realize their dreams. So these are basically what? These are the vent areas where they can go and they can relive or they can enjoy for some time at least their dreams. Okay? So that is very very commonly present in such postmodern cities. So लिख लेते हैं इसके बारे में थोड़ा सा. देखो, it is common to find fantasy and theme parks in the postmodern cities. Full stop. It is a way of satisfying the fantasies of the suburban living by creating prepackaged engineered landscapes. Full stop. This allows the satisfaction of egos. Satisfaction of the egos, comma, particularly of the of which population? Of the white collar worker population. Okay, so that is the city as theme park, that is very common. Then if you talk about another important aspect, already हमने बात कर लिया, लेकिन फिर भी बता देता हूँ, fortified cities. And fortified cities basically अभी हमने देखा था gated communities. So why these gated communities are rising? Because there is a high degree of socio-economic polarization. There is very high degree of socio-economic polarization, where we have seen that society is now polarized along the consumption line. Some who are displaying very high degree of consumption, they are the rich, and others, they have lower degree of consumption. So the difference between them, the inequality in the city has become too high, and this too high inequality is making this polarization and inequality is making people, particularly the rich classes, insecure within the city. And thus what they want to do, they want to fortify the places in which they are living. Okay? So very high degree of socio-economic polarization and inequality. This makes the rich classes in particular very concerned about, or you can say obsessed with security. Okay? So that is one case. Then if we talk about next term, one term we used was interdictory spaces. So देखो, what is the case of the city? Here there would be some gated communities which would be present here and there. Other spaces are basically what? They are the interdictory spaces within the city which are left out. Now here also what is done in the interdictory spaces, the spaces are made more uncomfortable by making it more surveillance oriented. It is again extension of what? The fortification process. That these areas are what? They are high under high surveillance. Like for example, it is very common, abhi Delhi mein bhi ho raha hai, that what is we are doing, there is installation of CCTV cameras. In US it is very common practice. It is very common that suppose there are other places, like suppose there is a park. It would be very commonly found that suppose a bench is created, along this bench it would be found that it would be not under tree. So सीधा sunrise fall कर रहा है. That means normally people would avoid sitting on those benches. But it is important to make those benches because you have to satisfy the egos of the other classes as well. Okay? So the spaces are created in such a manner that people at least have the feeling of belongingness. But they are strongly still, there is surveillance taking place. And again it is extension of what? The fear that the polarization and inequality has created. Okay? So that is the case of interdictory spaces. So isko likh lo fatafat. It is found that the rest of the spaces within the city rest of the spaces within the city are highly high are under high surveillance. Are under high surveillance. Full stop. The intervening spaces are created in such a manner. The intervening spaces are created in such a manner that people feel insecure. People feel insecure. For example, presence of parks and benches without shades. Parks and benches without shades. Full stop. Such high surveillance and policing. Such high surveillance and policing is extension of the fear. Extension of the fear created due to polarization and inequality. Created due to polarization and inequality. Okay, so that is one case. Another aspect of these cities is these cities are also globalized spaces. These cities are also globalized spaces. So हमने इसके बारे में पहले बात किया है. If you remember, we talked about the world or global cities. World or global cities. So what is basically happening? These cities are interconnected with other cities of the world through the phenomena of globalization. They are interconnected with the other cities of the world. Other cities of the world through the phenomena of globalization. Through the phenomena of globalization. Globalization. In other words, situations of other cities would inevitably affect the conditions in the postmodern cities. The postmodern cities. You tell me, can I say that we are finding that we are dependent upon, for many services, for many goods, we are dependent upon many other cities? Like for example, अभी हमने बात किया made in China. Can I say world is dependent upon Shanghai, which is one of the main production center of the world, manufacturing center of the world? If some problem happens in Shanghai, can I say the supply of those goods and services would be disrupted? It would be very clearly disrupted. Okay? So again, what we will be finding that there would be effect of other cities over such postmodern cities. Okay? So that is one. Then एक और term हमने use किया, politics of nature. Politics of nature. And if we talk about the politics of nature, you tell me, can I say these are the cities which are growing fast? Can I say that? They are the cities which are growing fast. If they are economically developing, can I say they would also be inevitably causing environmental degradation? They would be inevitably causing environmental degradation. We can see so much taking place in news in India also. Now, under this scenario, there has to be some politics done so that we are at least giving feeling to the people that we are also concerned about the environment, the nature. Okay? So there is what? There is politicization of nature or the environment. So there would be certain groups who would talk about that, karenge kuch nahi. But they would definitely talk about that we should be preserving environment. So this politics would be going on, and that is one very important aspect of such postmodern cities. So likho, postmodern city grows or economically grows faster, which inevitably leads to environmental degradation, So environmental degradation, full stop. In order to ensure the perception that environment is preserved, politics of nature is one of the major characteristics of these cities. ठीक है. So all of these are the various characteristics of the post modern cities. अब एक लास्ट इसमें एक और चीज देख लेते हैं. Very important person, that is Edward Soja, E. Soja. And Soja, if you talk about, has highlighted 6 characteristics associated with the postmodern cities. ठीक है. Edward Soja or E. Soja has highlighted 6 characteristics associated with the postmodern cities. 6 characteristics associated with the postmodern cities. So one characteristic which is associated with the postmodern cities is they are exopolis. So exopolis is what? It is a postmodern city, large city which has outburst towards the periphery. It is a postmodern large city. Where growth has outburst towards the periphery. ठीक है. So Los Angeles is an example of what? It is an example of exopolis. New York is an example of an exopolis. जो अभी हमने स्ट्रक्चर बनाया था पहले, that was an example of what? It was an example of a exopolis. ठीक है. Then another term he talks about flex cities. So लिखो, these are transition cities which are changing their character from Fordism to post-Fordism. Following the phenomena of deindustrialization and delocalization. Third term which he cites, it is cosmopolis. So cosmopolis is what? It is a world or global city. Cosmopolis is a world or global city. इसके बारे में हमने डिटेल में बात किया ऑलरेडी. So what is a world and global city? Already हम देख चुके हैं. So that is one aspect. Then so these are the type of characteristics associated with the city. Then there are some other internal aspects of these cities. So he talks about one term which is splintered labyrinth. Splintered labyrinth. And what is this splintered labyrinth? It describes the extreme form of social, economic and political polarization, which is characteristic of postmodern city, ठीक है. So it is a postmodern city is a splintered labyrinth. Then it is also a carceral city. Carceral city refers to a city which is highly surveyed, a city which is under high surveillance and policing. ठीक है. तो अभी हमने इसके बारे में बात किया था. Sixth term he uses is that of sim cities. So what are basically sim cities? Sim cities are the new ways of seeing the city. It is full stop. It is a kind of way of changing the perspective of people about the city through the use of modern means of communication. ठीक है. सो अगर इसका एक छोटा सा एग्जांपल देना है तो यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड, इंडिया में भी अभी ऐसा फिनोमेना हो रहा है. हाउ मच ट्रबल्ड यू आर इकोनॉमिकली, अ परसेप्शन हैज बीन क्रिएटेड ऑफ नेशनलिज्म. ठीक है. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट परसेप्शन यू फॉरगेट ऑल योर पेन and ultimately go and vote for a particular party. So that is basically what this same type of system is created in this city. Actually, Soja has given all these names associated with Los Angeles. He found that all these 6 characteristics are present in Los Angeles. Later he extended that all these characteristics, if you talk about, are also found in other postmodern cities of the world. So you can understand postmodern cities would be India में भी धीरे धीरे, because Western culture is influencing. So here also what we are finding, the transformation is taking place. But very clearly the full developed cities would not be found. In India we can say at most there would be what? Flex cities, which are in the process of transition or transformation. ठीक है. In US there are many such cities which have fully developed or fully grown into the postmodern cities. ठीक है. So that is basically the case of postmodern urbanization. So we said अब एक चीज हो गया होगा कि you would have ultimately understood the process. ठीक है. Because we summed up so many things together इसके अंदर. ठीक है. And this is the modern theory, modern literature of urban geography. And you can see that in recent times in this human geography, not only urban geography, human geography, 2017 also question, 2018 also question. That means we can expect that even in 2019 there can be questions. More specifically, अगर यूपीएससी ने एक पूछा है तो 5 और बचे हैं अभी. ठीक है. At least I can think about, they can ask you about cosmopolis, they can ask you about sim cities. Others also भी पूछे जा सकते हैं. ठीक है. So there is again chance that it can be asked. So that is basically the case of post-modern cities. बंद करते हैं.